Chapter 619, Unable to Speak. Oravi Hospice Foundation. The lady responsible for volunteer registration hurriedly bent her back as she frantically searched for the fountain pen which had dropped. At this moment, Klein also noticed that she was reading a news report paper from a few days ago. It was back when his portrait and escapades were published. This area subscribes to newspapers from the Rørsted archipelago as well. From the time it takes to sail between the places, it's true that they can only read news from 3 to 4 days ago. If I had known earlier, I would have worn a new face and thought of a fake name before coming. Klein stood in front of the desk as he thought helplessly. The lady in her 30s finally picked up the fountain pen, raised her head, and said with a trembling voice, "Why you want to do volunteer work?" "Yes," Klein gave an affirmative answer. "B, but you're an adventurer," the mortified lady stammered for an excuse. She instinctively didn't want such an extremely dangerous person to do volunteer work. Being famous isn't necessarily a good thing. Forget it. I'll switch my appearance and name before coming again. Klein had the intention of giving up as he questioned her without any emotion. Who made the rules that adventurers can't do volunteer work? The lady responsible for the registration was on the brink of tears as she blurted out, "It wasn't me." The volunteer registration room became abnormally quiet. Klein was first taken aback before he felt like laughing. It took him a great deal of effort to maintain Jayamon Sparrow's image. After the lady calmed down, she sensed that her answer was clearly problematic. She forced a smile and said, "No, I mean this isn't regulated by anyone. My impression of adventurers is that they are very busy. They need to be out at sea and have very little time to do volunteer work." "That's them," Klein answered succinctly. The lady held her palm to her mouth as she revealed a smile. "All right, I'll immediately help you with your registration." As she spoke, she pulled out a form and handed it over. "Please fill it in. We will provide the corresponding training and volunteer jobs according to your requests. We will contact you, or you can always come over to inquire for any updates." She had already made up her mind not to put Jayamon Sparrow's form into the docket. Instead, she would hand it directly to the Foundation's person in charge and the police. "Goddess, why is this dangerous fellow here to do volunteer work?" She secretly drew a crimson moon on her chest. Klein nodded in silence. He took the form and sat down. Picking up a fountain pen, he began filling in his basic information. During this process, a man in a doctor's gown entered and asked, "Joanna, are there any new volunteers? We'll begin the morning training." Joanna, who was in charge of the registration, had the intention to shake her head. However, Jayamon Sparrow, who sat opposite her, gave her an intense sense of pressure even though he remained silent and didn't raise his head. She didn't dare to lie. "There is," she first replied to the man and then looked at Klein. "Mr. Sparrow, do you wish to receive the basic training for volunteer work now, or do you wish to wait until tomorrow?" Klein thought for a moment before saying, "Now." He planned on familiarizing himself first, allowing him to show his professionalism at volunteer work after changing his identity. That way, he could quickly help out at a hospital. Joanna clearly drew a breath and said, "Then follow Mr. Gravia after you are done filling in the form." "All right," Klein replied calmly. Half an hour later, the calm and polite adventurer who had his madness hidden in him stared at the abnormally dirty toilet in front of him. He held his breath and said, "Scrub it." You have already received the basic training on how to carry a patient. However, that isn't the most common task we do at a hospital. We're mainly in charge of cleaning a patient's vomit or changing and washing the linen, as well as maintaining the cleanliness of the washroom. Heh. Matters such as bandaging wounds are left to the professionals. We only need you to have the basics grasped." Gravia pinched his nose as he pointed to the stained toilets. "A volunteer has already demonstrated it to you. Please begin." "This is very different from what I imagined. Completely different." Klein's first reaction was to turn his back and leave, but he ultimately picked up the cleaning tools with a deadpan expression. He held back his disgust and went over before crouching down. Then he leaned back a little as he extended his right arm. At noon, Klein took off his white gown and wore his top hat before leaving Oravi Hospice Foundation with a cold expression. He had serious second thoughts about continuing the volunteer work to find opportunities for real acting. Only when his carriage arrived at the Sweet Lemon Bar did he steel his resolve to continue the attempt. I have to become a mariontist in 1350 and digest the potion, so as to begin seeking the clues to become a high-sequence beyonder. Klein emphasized his goal once again. He retracted his emotions and entered the Sweet Lemon Bar. He spent 8 pence for apple cider marinated pork ribs and a piece of buttered bread. Together with a cup of rye beer costing 1.5 pence, they formed Klein's lunch. He finished eating in an unhurried fashion before using a handkerchief to wipe his mouth. He said to the bartender, "Where's your boss? I have something to talk to him about." Since he had already verbally agreed to join the Adventurer Association, Klein naturally didn't plan on missing the opportunity to use this loose alliance. He planned to ask Bilt Brando to contact unaffiliated artisans or artisans who were willing to moonlight. He wanted an artisan to create an item like Azek's copper whistle, so he didn't need to set up a ritual and chant the incantations every time he summoned his messenger. It was complicated, troublesome, and a waste of time. Of course, if Bilt Brando didn't know an artisan, Klein didn't plan on forcing the matter. After all, joining the Adventurer Association didn't require him to pay. The bartender pointed to the staircase and said, "He's on the 2nd floor. If you've already agreed to join his association and have seen those bodyguards, then they'll let you up." Klein nodded indiscernibly and slowly got up before walking towards the staircase. Indeed, no guards stopped him. Only when he reached the 2nd floor did a bodyguard approach him to inquire about his purpose. Thanks to his reputation as Jayman Sparrow, he easily met Bilt Brando again. He also saw an unfamiliar man beside him. "My friend, Sothoth Yan, an important member of the association." Bilt pointed to the man in a red headscarf. At the same time, he exchanged looks with the man and saw the seriousness and puzzlement in each other's eyes. After a simple greeting, Klein got a chair to sit on. He directly said, "I wish to obtain the help of an artisan. I wonder if the association is able to provide any clues." "Artisan?" Bilt sucked at his cigar and paused for a few seconds. He deliberated for a moment before saying, "I do know an artisan, but he's unwilling to meet strangers. This will bring him grave danger. If you have any requests, then I can be the middleman. I believe I have the required reputation to do so." To most churches, mid- and low-sequence beyonders without any evil intentions could be ignored at times. However, artisans needed to be dealt with indiscriminately. Otherwise, the mystical items they created could flood the markets, bringing about extreme unrest to human society. From the looks of it, the Adventurer Association which Bilt organized isn't just wasting money. At the very least, it has amassed quite a lot of resources and information channels. Klein took out the Murloc bladder, which he had long prepared. "I wish to make this into a ring, mainly to provide one with underwater mobility." He temporarily didn't mention the messenger, planning to test the artisan's ability and Bilt's reputation. If the messenger summoning incantation became widely known, it would create quite a bit of trouble. A sequence 9 Beyonder characteristic isn't expensive. Even if Bilt succumbs to greed and usurps the created mystical item, it doesn't matter. After all, I have a bunch of charms from the sea god domain. Furthermore, it's not like I can't find him to settle the debt. This is better. For him to be able to organize an adventurer association, he definitely has plenty of money and ingredients. As Klein's thoughts reeled, he couldn't help but size up Bilt. In that instant, Bilt shuddered for some baffling reason. All the hair on his back stood up. He felt as though Jayman Sparrow's eyes looked like he had seen a treasure trove. As treasure, this wasn't a good experience at all. Bilt glanced at Sothoth and forced a smile. "This is a Murloc's bladder, right?" Making a material at this level into a mystical item basically wouldn't have any accidents. "The artisan's fee is 150 pounds. You can pay me after it's crafted." "A very fair price." Klein nodded silently as he threw the Murloc bladder over. After Bilt caught it, he added, "Help me ask the artisan if he has the ability to fix the summoning ritual of a spirit world creature onto an item which can be used for at least a year." "No problem." Bilt heaved a sigh of relief before signaling to Sothoth with his eyes. Sothoth rubbed his depressed eye socket and took a step forward. Mr. Jayaman, would you be interested in heading out to sea soon? We already have a few pretty good ships. They're planning on hiring manpower to the Eastern Front to hunt pirates. Interesting, but my focus right now is to digest my potion. Klein calmly shook his head. Sothoth's smile froze before vanishing. He didn't say anything further, as it was a rejection from an adventurer at the pirate admiral level. He and Bilt had already found the relevant newspapers and confirmed the authenticity of Jayaman Sparrow. Klein slowly stood up and pressed his top hat to his chest before bowing slightly. Thank you for your help. Bilt's facial muscles twitched a little as though he was holding back something. He had something to say, but he wasn't able to say it out loud. Finally, he slowly drew in a breath and smiled. I believe we should hope for a pleasant partnership. Klein sensed Bilt's and Sothoth's abnormality, but he suppressed his puzzlement and didn't ask. I can't ask. There will be trouble once I ask. I have to focus on digesting the potion. Klein turned around and walked to the door before turning the doorknob. Mr. Jayaman, Bilt suddenly said. The corner of Klein's mouth twitched as he calmly looked back. Nothing. Haha, I mean, as a member of the association, you can have cheaper drinks over here, Bilt said with a forced smile. Do you think I would have pressed on the matter, Tusk? Klein gently nodded and opened the door to leave. After watching his back vanish, Bilt stared in a daze for 2 seconds before letting out a long sigh.